I have sat through courts-martial. I have watched men in uniform break under cross-examination, watched prosecutors dismantle careers with a single document, watched boards vote to end things that took decades to build. After 31 years as a JAG officer, I thought I understood the mechanics of a room deciding someone's fate. I was wrong about what I would see in room 114 of the Harlan County Municipal Building on a Tuesday morning in February. I was there as an observer. A former colleague had called me the night before, a retired Air Force legal officer named Pat Duvall, who now practiced administrative law, and asked if I would come, not to represent anyone. Just to be present, he said. He did not tell me why. Pat had good instincts, and I had driven 40 minutes through a gray mountain morning to find out what he knew that I didn't. The room was what you'd expect from a state licensing board. Fluorescent tubes overhead, drop-sailing tiles, 3 folding tables pushed together for the 5-member panel, a single table facing them for the subject of the hearing. The carpet was the color of old coffee. A clock on the wall clicked every minute in the silence. The panel members arranged their folders with the unhurried certainty of people who believed the outcome was already settled. The woman at the single table was named Claire Merritt. She was in her late 20s, maybe 30 at most. She wore clean scrubs, teal, and a hospital ID badge on a lanyard. She had dark hair pulled back and a stillness about her that I noticed immediately. Not the stillness of someone defeated, the stillness as of someone waiting. Across the room, seated to the left of the panel as a witness, was Dr. Callum Reed. He was the chief of medicine at Ridgeline Community Hospital, mid-50s, silver at his temples, the kind of man who wore his confidence like a well-fitted jacket. He had filed the ethics complaint. His hands were folded on the table. He looked like a man who had already won. The board chair, a woman named Holloway, opened the session at 9. She recited the procedural language with the flat efficiency of someone who had done it 200 times. The complaint, that Claire Merritt, a registered nurse employed on the medical surgical floor at Ridgeline Community Hospital, had administered a medication adjustment outside her authorized scope of practice, had failed to consult the attending physician on record, and had thereby endangered the life of a patient. Dr. Reed's complaint stated that Merritt had exceeded her authority, that she lacked the clinical judgment to make independent decisions, and that she posed an ongoing risk to patient welfare. The board was considering revocation of her nursing license. Merritt sat quietly through all of it, no flinching, no visible emotion. She had a small legal pad in front of her and a pen she didn't pick up. Holloway turned to Reed. Dr. Reed, you may summarize your concerns for the board. He summarized. He was organized, persuasive, the kind of man who had given speeches. He described the incident. A post-surgical patient who had spiked a fever overnight, and Merritt on a night shift. Attending physician unreachable for 11 minutes, had adjusted the patient's IV fluid rate and initiated a cooling protocol without documented physician authorization. The patient, he said, had been stable. There had been no emergency. She had acted unilaterally. He concluded, demonstrated a pattern of overconfidence that this institution cannot afford. I wrote the word overconfidence on my notepad and put a question mark after it. Holloway turned to Merritt. Mrs. Merritt, do you have a response? Merritt said, the patient's temperature was rising toward a threshold I recognized as dangerous. I acted on that recognition. The attending was contacted. The patient recovered. Her voice was even, no apology in it, no plea. Reid said, quietly enough that the board could hear him, she has no business making those calls. That is not what a floor nurse does. Holloway made a note. One of the other board members, a man with reading glasses perched at the end of his nose, leaned toward his colleagues and spoke in a low voice. I had seen that lean before. It meant they were close to a vote. Then the door opened. It did not bang open. It opened with the measured, deliberate movement of someone who has trained for exactly this. A man who opens a door as if he already owns the room on the other side of it. He was in Air Force service dress, silver eagles on the shoulder boards, wings above the left breast pocket, a full colonel. He stepped in and held the door, and 4 other men in service dress came in after him. 2 were younger, one was closer to the colonel's age, and the last was a master sergeant who moved like a loaded spring. All 5 had the kind of faces that do not do small talk. The colonel said, "Pardon the interruption. I'm Colonel Marcus Webb, Commander, 58th Rescue Wing. I understand this board is considering an action against Claire Merritt." Holloway looked up. The reading glasses board member took them off. The room had changed temperature in the 15 seconds since the door opened, and everyone in it had noticed. Holloway said, "Colonel, this is a closed administrative hearing. You would need to. I have a document I'd like the board to enter into the record," Webb said. He was not aggressive. He was simply not negotiable. I'll take 5 minutes of your time, with your permission. It was technically her decision. She looked at the board members, who looked back at her, and she said 5 minutes. Webb came forward and placed a folder on Holloway's table, then stepped back. He did not sit. None of the 5 men sat. They stood in a loose line along the wall, and the room had no idea what to do with them. 3 years ago, Webb said, a UH-60 helicopter on a training run out of Mountain Home Air Force Base lost power in a narrow mountain valley at approximately 8,000 feet elevation during a winter storm. The crew of 4, 2 pilots, a flight engineer, and a rescue specialist, went down hard on a ridgeline in the Sawtooth Range. The temperature that night was 4 degrees Fahrenheit. They were not found for 11 hours. The room was very quiet. Even the clock seemed to stop. By the time the JPRC recovery team reached the site, 2 of the crew had critical injuries. One had a tensioned pneumothorax. One was in the early stages of hypothermic cardiac arrhythmia. He paused. They were alive, all 4 of them, because the person who was with them from hour 3 to hour 14 knew what she was doing. He looked at Merritt for the first time. She did not look away. That person is Claire Merritt, who at the time held an Air Force pararescue specialty qualification, AFSC 1T2. She had inserted herself into a backcountry search and rescue volunteer network after separating from active duty. She responded to the distress signal that night because she was the closest trained responder. She reached the crash site in darkness in a storm, on foot. She spent 11 hours managing 4 casualties with the contents of a field kit and what she could improvise from the aircraft debris. One of the board members had put his pen down. He was not writing anymore. He was listening. Webb opened the folder and lifted a document. Several pages, stapled. This is the Joint Personnel Recovery Center recovery log for that incident. It contains the names of the 4 airmen recovered, the documented condition of each at time of rescue initiation, the interventions performed, and the notation on each case. I'll read that notation. He found the line. He read it without theater, just the flat authority of a man reading a fact into a record. Actions by civilian PJ, qualified first responder, prevented at minimum 2 and likely 3 fatalities. Improvised chest decompression, maintained airway in unconscious crew member for 9 hours, managed hypothermic patient through 2 significant cardiac events without defibrillator. Recovery team lead noted on site. We are looking at a textbook hold under impossible conditions. Recommend formal commendation. He set the document down. The board has our recommendation for the full record. The 4 airmen in that valley are all on active duty today. Holloway said nothing for a moment. Then, Colonel, how does this bear on the matter before us? It bears on who Click Merritt is, Webb said. You have a complaint in front of you that says she lacks the clinical judgment to act independently when a patient is deteriorating. I am telling you that on a frozen ridgeline in the dark, with no physician, no hospital, and no authorization except what she knew, she kept 4 men breathing until we could get to them. If she made a call on a post-surgical fever in a lit, staffed hospital in the middle of the night, I believe she made the right one. I looked at Reed. His hands were still folded on the table, but his jaw had tightened and he had stopped looking at the board. He was looking at the table. Holloway said, "We'll need to confer." They conferred for 9 minutes, I counted. Merritt did not move from her chair. She sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes straight ahead, and she waited with the same stillness she had carried since I first saw her. She had not performed the room at any point in the morning. She had simply been present in it, solid, settled, immovable, while people argued about who she was. Holloway spoke. In light of the additional information entered into the record, this board finds no grounds to proceed with revocation. The complaint is dismissed. Ms. Merritt, your license is confirmed in good standing. Merritt nodded once, the way a person nods when they receive information they already knew. Then something happened that I have seen very few times in 31 years of military and legal proceedings, and never in a county licensing boardroom. The master sergeant along the wall moved first. He came to attention. Not a slow, formal drift into position, but a snap, heels together, eyes forward, chin level, the whole body aligned. It made a sound in the small room. The 2 younger airmen followed him. Then the 3rd. Then Colonel Webb, Silver Eagles and all, came to attention with the rest of them and held it. They were not saluting. There was no hat in this room, no flag. This was something else. 4 men standing at full military attention in a county, building for a woman in teal scrubs at a folding table, a recognition without words. The highest form a soldier knows how to give. Merritt stood. She faced them. She was composed, but her eyes were bright. Reed pushed back his chair. He rose slowly and gathered his folder. The way a man gathers his things when he has been told, the meeting is over, and he has nothing left to add. I watched him reach the door, and I watched him do what I suspect will stay with him for a long time. He turned once, very briefly, and looked at her before he left. Then the door closed behind him. I stayed seated until the board filed out and the room was nearly empty. Webb shook Merritt's hand, a firm grip. No ceremony, one professional to another. His 4 men did the same, one by one. The master sergeant said something to her that I couldn't hear, and she said something back, and they both nodded the way people nod when they mean it. When the last of them were gone, Pat Dovell appeared at my elbow. He had been sitting 3 rows back, and I had nearly forgotten he was there. "Now you know why I called," he said. I looked at the empty table where Merritt had been sitting, the blank legal pad, the pen she had never picked up, the absence of someone who had come in alone and left having nothing left to prove. "She was always going to win this one," I said. "Yes," Pat said, "but it matters that someone was here to see it." He was right. That is why I am writing this down. Not because she needed a witness. She did not. She has never needed a room to know what she did on that mountain. She needed none of us. But some things should be witnessed. The moment a board chair sets down a complaint that never should have been filed, the sound of 4 sets of heels snapping together for a woman in a county room with bad carpet, the look on a chief of medicine's face when he realizes, too late, that the person he moved against had already saved lives he will never be qualified to count. I drove home in the same gray mountain light I had driven through that morning. It felt different going back. Most days do not carry weight. That one did. I have sat through a great deal of official proceedings in my life. I have watched men stand and be counted, and I have watched men fold. I have seen honor performed and honor real, and I know the difference between them. What those 5 men did in that room, in a county building in fluorescent light, with no audience worth mentioning, was real. What Claire Merritt did on a frozen ridgeline to earn it was more real still. Some debts do not wait for the right occasion. They show up in the wrong room at the wrong time, and they settle anyway. I am glad I was there to see it.